And here we go. Hello, everyone. Simon here. We'll get set up properly in a second, but we're just testing things out. But this time we've also got Elly and Matt with us. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey. Yeah, good, thanks.
You?
Good. Yes, we got 3 of us on this week. So this is going to be interesting. So let's see. Hi, Randy. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us. Now I got to see if I can share my. Can you guys see my screen? Am I sharing my screen?
Not currently.
Nope.
No, not currently. Okay. So let's just before we start, then let's just change. If I change to your screen, Elly, just to make you presenter. Here we go, just to test this out. So you get a little box that says share screen. Right, you can see your screen. I think is something to do with my Catalina, which I ridiculously upgraded to over the weekend. Okay, fine. Let's see. So that works. That's a good start. Let's see that. Oh, thanks, Jan. Jan can see your screen too. That's good. Let's see if I can change it back to me. If I share my one again, if I make me presenter, show my screen.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's working. Okay, great. Lovely. So that's what it needed. It needed a technical refresh. Just switch it over to a different thing and back again.
Turn it on.
Excellent. Turn it off and on. Yes, exactly. So welcome, everybody. I'm Simon Walker. I'm Director of Training at Maxon, and I'm delighted to welcome our very own trainers, Elly Wade and Matt Umney. Welcome, officially.
Thank you
We've
very
all
much.
gone to the same dealer today, for some reason.
Representing.
It's Cinema 4D, exactly.
Branding.
Branding.
We were paid to wear them.
That's true. Literally, we are. That's absolutely true. So we're going to be running through some things that are listed out inside this little blog post here, and more on what we're doing in a second, modeling with primitive objects. But just before we get started, we are recording this session. You'll automatically get the link at the end of the recording. And if you look in the chat window, you can automatically see already some of the information that we're sharing with you, things like where to look at previous sessions. And you can look at all the previous sessions, the recordings of those that we ran in May. And also, this is where we'll be adding links during the session in case we need to add any download files. Spoiler alert, we'll probably add some project files along the way. Cool. Greetings from Newcastle. Hi, Jay. Question from Rob about the links for last week. I'm glad you mentioned that. So that I have prepared something just in case you didn't get links from last week. Here is from the FUI design. I'm just putting them in the chat window here. In case you didn't get them, I've just popped them in. So those are the download links and the notes from last week and the project files too. There's about 2 gigs of project files. Fantastic. So thanks for reminding me of that. Okay, great. So let me hand over to you, Elly, and you can tell us what we're doing in Cinema 4D stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Here we are, make presenter.
Okay, hi everyone. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to turn my webcam off for this as well, just to make it a little bit easier to see my screen.
Me too.
And so you don't see my hands flapping around. Right, so
Cool.
I guess, yeah.
It's all working. I can see it. I can see it as well.
Yeah, so can we all see and hear me? That's good.
Yes, I can.
Cool.
If
so
anyone
I guess
wants to comment on the questions, please just jump in and ask a question, or if you can't see anything, please let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to just ask any questions throughout this entire thing and we'll get through those. So I guess the best place to start would be to sort of say this is quite like an entry-level thing we're going to be doing. So modeling with primitive objects. So if you've never used Cinema 4D or if you're a beginner, this is going to be perfect for you. So when you first open Cinema 4D, this is what you're going to see. This is your interface. And don't worry, we're not going to go through every single icon now. But we're going to look at the viewport, which is in the middle here. This is when we create an object. it's going to show in our scene here. Then we're going to take a look at some icons up the top, which we've got move, scale and rotate. We're going to look at creating objects here and then deformers here. Can everyone see what I'm kind of selecting as I'm saying it? Is like the lag good or bad? All right, good.
Yeah, we're all right.
And then we're also going to take a look at our objects manager, which is the top right, and then our attributes on the bottom right. So what we'll do, we're going to actually be creating a ray gun model using primitive shapes. And what's great about Cinema 4D is it's got a bunch of 3D objects to use, which is a really good starting point for 3D models. So to create an object, we can come up here and we can click. And if you can see a little black triangle on the icon, that means there's a lot more options. If we click and hold our mouse, we can see those. And we can select an object and it will create it in our viewport here, in our objects manager, and we've got our attributes down here. So to go through the icons, we've got the move icon, and then you get your axis handles, and they're arrows, so you can click and hold the mouse and drag, and it will move those along those axes. You then got scale, which you've got your little cubes on the end, and it's the same. You just click and drag, and it scales uniformly because it's parametric. And then you've also got these little orange handles, which you can click and drag, and you can move along the axis. Our third icon is our rotation bands, and it's the same thing really. You click and drag around. And a good little trick for these is if you click and hold your mouse and then press shift, you can rotate in 5-degree increments. So you can be more specific with your rotations or your movements. So that's kind of a basic how to move, scale and rotate and create an object in Cinema 4D. 3 more icons we're going to do. This is sort of like a really nice basic introduction, and these are really good things for you to pick up. Would be our 3 icons at the top right here. So if you click and then drag your mouse, and I'm holding my button down, and then we can pan. The second one we can then dolly, and the third we can then rotate. And a little tip for these, if I click and hold 1 on my keyboard and then click and hold my mouse, it's like a shortcut key. And then 2 is our shortcut for our dolly, and 3 is a shortcut for our pan. And we also have shortcuts for our move, scale and rotate, which are E, and I just have to click the E, I don't need to hold it down, then R, and then T. So
all of these shortcuts are in a little presentation that I believe Simon is going to be giving out a little bit later, aren't they? Aren't you?
I do have some shortcuts. There's a list of the favorite ones we're going to do, but if rather than document every single one inside the software, there is a way where you can have a look at each particular interface element, isn't there? So if you wanted to find out more info, such as the shortcut.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was the lead into how does one do that?
So I was if
Matt,
you hover over
go or shall I go?
As you've got them out, if you hover over any particular element, pretty much in Cinema 4D, it will give you a little pop-up that then shows you what the shortcut would be. So if there is a little shortcut underneath, then you can do it. Some shortcuts require 2 different keyboards, not at the same time necessarily. So if you just scroll down to display underneath where you are at the moment and then click, you'll be able to see that those shortcuts require 2 things to press. So you press 1 and then press the other, not at the same time. So there are lots of shortcuts. That's why we're not going to document all of them. Okay. Yeah, I think you're pretty much ready to go, aren't we?
Yeah. So I think what's best is I was going to show the final outcome of these kind of like 4 or 5 weeks of webinars throughout this month. And we're doing a ray gun project. And I have to shout out Darren, because he was the guy who initially created kind of modeling with primitives and creating a ray gun. So thanks for the project / inspiration, Darren. So this is what we're going to eventually create using primitive objects, deformers, generators and materials. This is going to be our final look. But this next hour, this is what we're going to be creating. We're going to create a really basic ray gun using some really simple 3D objects and a couple of deformers. And this is hopefully what people are going to get at the end of this hour.
So we can follow along as well, can't we, Elly?
Yeah, definitely. It will be a pace where you can follow along, or you can kind of do it after when you get the link sent over to you, however people learn best, I guess.
Great. I've added, by the way, the Cinema 4D project that you made into the chat window. So if anyone wants to download that and have a look at that for this week, and also we'll pick up a few things over the next couple of weeks with it too.
Cool. Cool. So this is our new project, and I guess the most important thing to mention is to start by saving your project. That is probably one of the most important things. If you learn anything in this next hour, that is the best thing to learn.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, not only am I a trainer, I also work in tech support of Cinema 4D, and the number of people that I have who say, hey, I've been working on this project for 6 days, and then I go to save it and it doesn't work. My worry is, why have you not saved in 6 days? So the first thing you should ever do before you start any project is save your Cinema 4D file somewhere.
Save Matt that difficult conversation.
Yeah, save me the work.
Right, so if I go back to the model we're going to be creating, we're going to start by creating the body of the ray gun. And so I think if you can look at this and think, what kind of basic shape or object can you start to model with this? That's like a good starting point. So for me, this would be a cylinder, and this is the shape that I did start to create with. So if I click and hold, I can add my cylinder in. And as you can see, the orientation is slightly off because we want it on its side, not facing upwards. So there are two ways. You could hit R on your keyboard and you could rotate it 90 degrees. But what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to change in my attributes manager, I'm going to change the orientation to +Z. And I guess both options are absolutely fine to do. This is just a neater way of doing it. And that way, if I keep the orientation of all the shapes the same, the axes are going to be the same as well, which is just a good way to work. Just good habits, I guess. So with our cylinder created, we can see our edges are relatively jagged. And this is to do with our rotation segments, which at the moment are 16. If I reduce that to 3, you can see the higher you get, the smoother. But a general rule is the more segments, the more polygons, the longer render times can be. So you want to find like a nice, like a happy medium, which for me is about 32.
Elly, do you do renders as you are modeling like this, or do you bring up to a certain level of shapes before you actually then do a test render?
Yeah, I'd wait until I get to a certain level, I guess, until I do a test render, especially for something like this where it's quite basic primitive modeling. I'd probably wait until later on. But I guess Matt probably does a lot more advanced modeling, so he might know when's best to do a test.
Yeah, to be honest, I normally do renders when it comes to textures and lighting. So that's one of those things that I worry about later on. For basic modeling, this isn't going to do much. We've got a question in already that says from Darren, thank you. I can't see the wireframe. How do you show the lines so I can see them like you?
Okay, yeah, sure. So up in display, there are many different options you can choose from. So I mean, I'm not the best at pronouncing this word, so if I'm wrong, please tell me. Grout shading.
I think it's Grout.
Should we go with Grout because we both
we'll
think so. So these are different options. So this is your standard Grout shading. You've then got Grout shading lines, which, as you can see, shows the lines, and for this, it's our height segments and our rotation segments. And then you've got other options, which with this model might not show them as well. Different options like that. So I tend to work with the lines on, but I guess it's personal preference. So what I want to do, I'm going to look at some more options in my Attributes Manager, because I want to create a bit of like a nose to my ray gun, so it's going to kind of come in slightly. And with that, I can use the fillet option, and if I go closer, you can see it's created a rounding. We can increase our segments and increase our radius. And what I'm actually going to do is because I'm recreating the project file that you guys have, I actually know the size and the segments that I need this to be, and I want it to match basically the same project file that you guys have, because then it will make more sense to follow along with. So if I increase my segments and my radius,
that's an interesting concept, actually, Elly.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask you a quick question? When you're approaching modeling these things, do you model according to a physical size, if you're modeling something that you know is approximately the real world size, or do you go by proportions?
I think it depends what you're modeling and what the project is. For me, because I knew this was going to be, I guess, just a demonstration of a ray gun. And I mean, I don't know what the actual size of a ray gun would be. I've done it purely as, I don't know, I guess just however I would do it in Cinema 4D. But if you were creating something like a table and chairs set based on a specific table and chairs, you could match it to real world.
Got it. I might have to share the 1954 YouTube link for the Flash Gordon series there. This ray gun would fit in perfectly.
For today's inspiration, it was.
I've been wanting the excuse to share that. Yes.
Right. So what I also did was I've increased the radius and the height of my ray gun to match the project file as well, and we've got this nice kind of rounding at the end, which would be great for when we add things like deformers. And I guess this might be a good time for me to throw it over to Matt, if he's happy with that, and he can go through some of the deformers that we could be using in Cinema 4D, and then we're going to kind of take that knowledge and that information back and see how we can change our model and make it look a bit more like a ray gun.
Yep, sure. I'm happy to take on that. My internet's being really dodgy for it's typical, isn't it? It's been fine all day. The moment we do a webinar, all of a sudden I lost you guys in the middle of a question. So yeah, if you feel free to swap it over to me and I'll do what I can.
Yeah, if not, throw it back.
Right, send it over to you.
Okay, can you see anything at all?
Not yet.
Not yet. You'll get a little box that you'll have to click to say yes. That's the little dialog box to accept sharing.
Can you throw it and send it back to me? I've just had to. The one thing we didn't test was my screen.
Okay, all right.
Or we could do a really clever thing where Matt, you could talk and I could press the buttons.
Yes, we could do. That would work.
Okay, I have to make you back presenter, Elly, and then send it back to Matt again. There we go. So you should get that pop up again, Matt.
Yes, I have. Show my screen. Can you see that? Can you see the lovely blue mountains and blue skies?
Yes,
photorealistic render.
That's it. You see, this is what you can do in Cinema 4D in no time at all. So deformers in Cinema 4D exist sort of up here. We've got our list of stuff and we've got our cubes, and deformers exist over here in the top sort of right. They allow you to deform objects. That's sort of part of their name. As you can see, we've got an awful lot of different types of deformers to use. We're not going to go through a lot of them today. We're only going to go through a couple of them. They can deform all sorts of objects, but the ones we're going to focus on, particularly at the moment, are our primitives. So let's just create a cube, and I will quickly demonstrate how to use a deformer. So I've made my cube a bit bigger with this little orange handle, and then I have created a bend deformer. Now at the moment, the bend deformer and the cube are not attached. They won't do anything. It's a really simple case of clicking and holding on the bend deformer and then dragging it into the cube. So you can see that my little icon changes from an arrow pointing left to an arrow pointing down. It must be pointing down in order for it to work. If you point it left, it will just rearrange your thing and it won't make any difference whatsoever. It must be down. You'll know it's worked because you'll get the little plus symbol or minus symbol next to the cube where you can plus and minus this. So we have made the bend a child of the cube. Now, if we grab our little orange dot of the cube of the bend, not the cube, so the bend has an orange dot as well, I can click and drag, and you can see that we've got a bend bending, but we've got no cube bending. It's kind of shearing more to anything else. The reason for this is quite a simple one. It's segments. It's the number of segments that exist inside the cube. Cinema 4D and most 3D applications don't know how to bend a face. It's got no knowledge of how to do this. So we simply need to increase the number of segments over here in the segments of the cube. So if you haven't got it already, select the cube, then look at the segments. And I happen to know this, for example, that it's the Y segment. So it's the number of segments that create the Y height of this cube. If I just increase that by 1, you can see it now bends somewhere. So that you guys can see the number of lines it's creating, I'm going to join Elly with the Grout Shading. And then if I keep increasing this, you can see that we get to a point where the bend looks nice and we're not seeing any faceted edges. If you go too far, you can see that we're getting those straight lines again. So it's just a simple case of scrolling these down and using the segments to increase and decrease the sort of smoothness of these objects. Now there are loads of different deformers that we could use. I'm just going to copy and paste my cube just really quickly, which is a simple case that Elly's going to go through later. And I can create another deformer. So let's just create a twist, put the twist in the cube, and then use the orange handle of the twist. Oh, I put it in the wrong one. Very careful to be, very obvious to be careful which one of you're doing. And then if you twist, you can see I'm now twisting the other cube. So that is an exceptionally fast breakdown of what a deformer is and how to use them. As I said, there are an awful lot of them, and we're not going to go through most of them. So they're for you to play with in your own time. So hopefully now
got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Well, I've got a couple of questions for you. Just one thing that has come up a couple of times for people who have been new to cinema is this concept of objects, and this really quite expansive theory of how you can then take one object and put it into another area, if you like. So would you mind just like talking about that? Because you've got twist under one cube, and when you applied it to the wrong cube, then you quickly were able to apply it to the different cube. I just wondered if you could just talk about processes for that and what would be useful.
Okay, yeah, well, a deformer exists in its own right. So if I, for example, just deleted my cubes, I would have a deformer. And this exists as an object with its own attributes and its own parameters down here in the bottom right-hand corner. You can choose how far it twists and how far it doesn't. This will just apply to any different object that you make it a child of. So if I was to create a cube and I make it a child of the cube with enough segments, then it will twist. If my cube is somewhere else, the twist actually has impact where the twist box is. So it can't twist anything properly if it's not inside. So if I add a twist now, it is sort of twisting, but it's taking its points from one and sort of cycloning it round. It's easy to just move these sorts of things to different objects where you can just create a different object and put the twist in that one instead, and you see we're getting the same effect there. Is that sort of what you were after?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also Torrance is following this up with a related question. about using deformers and telling which direction you need to twist or pull or bend in. Is there any way to tell which axis is going to affect which parameter?
That's a good one. To be honest, it depends on the way that the thing is facing. And it's a little bit a case of testing and hoping, to be honest. So if we wanted it to twist this way, we need to make sure it's, you know, upright. If I wanted it to twist another, I would need to rotate my twist, and then I'm going to get a completely different mess. So if I went back to where I had a bendy cube, thankfully Cinema 4D has quite a large amount of undos going, if you haven't used it already. And I put the cube in the bend. The actual position of this bend and size of this bend will denote how big that curvature is. To be honest, you need to put it inside because it really doesn't know that it's going to have an axis. It doesn't necessarily need to be a cube. It could be all sorts of things that it will bend. So it doesn't denote a particular axis as such. But you can see that I'm twisting in all sorts of ways in order to get different results. So you just need to make sure that you align your bend or deformer wherever it is that you want and try it, to be perfectly honest.
Got it. And also a point that Randy's making is that it's easy to click in the wrong place and drag the deformer rather than twisting it.
Sorry, Simon, I've lost you there.
Okay, am I back? Let me know if I'm back. Sounds like a cutout still.
Yeah, I can hear you, but Matt may have.
Matt.
Oh, sorry,
Matt's fault.
Right. Sorry about that.
Hey, no worries, Matt. Randy was just asking, is there a good position to put your position the mouse to make the deformer deform rather than just to move it?
I suppose you can always use your attributes manager instead. So over here in the attributes of my bend deformer, you have strength, which is how far it bends, and then angle as to which way round the 360 degrees it goes. To use that, you can either click an up and down on the arrow, or if you actually click and hold on those arrows with your left mouse button and then scrub your mouse, you can do this much faster so that it is limiting to an angle rather than just sort of freehanding it.
That's a good point, to actually get it on those UI interface elements, like on that particular orange arrow.
Yeah, so if I wanted to, I could make that 90, and I know that that is a 90-degree bend now.
Fantastic. This seems to be a popular subject because we've got a couple of more questions. Can I ask you one more question? Because I know Elly's got some things she wants to show. Yeah. So we don't want to run out of time. But is there a way, this is from Leon, is there a way to match the size of the deformer with the one of the object?
There is, and it is this little button called Fit to Parent. So with your bend deformer selected, there's this little button here, Fit to Parent. The bend deformer is now the same size as the cube. Sometimes you want that if you want the whole thing, but of course sometimes you won't, because if you want a sharper bend, then you need it to be smaller.
Got it. That's a good tip.
Okay.
Great. There's a couple of other ones that are coming up. I will store those for later, everyone, but I just wanted to make sure that we get through most of our things. So it sounds like it's time to switch over to you, Elly.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just make you presenter. Thanks for that, Matt.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
So you might have to release your screen because I just tried sending it over to Elly and.
Oh, do I? All right. Okay. Let's make Elly Wade organizer. Make the presenter. Okay.
Oh, here we go. Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Matt. That was super useful. And with that kind of knowledge and information, we can now have a think what sort of deformers we'd want to use to recreate our ray gun shapes. So for me, one of the ones that we didn't go through was the taper. And so, oh, what am I doing? Right, so what we want, so I want, if we go back here, to create this tapered shape. Just going to go back to our demo. So if we grab our taper, and then we'll make it a child of our cylinder. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the fit to parent. And then I noticed someone did say about how do you know which way or which position it's going to kind of deform in. And like Matt said, sometimes it is a case of just seeing, kind of increasing the strength and seeing that this, for example, is rotated in the wrong way. So all I'll do is with the R on my keyboard, hit that to get my rotation up. And I'm going to hold shift and drag 90 degrees. And now what's happened is because only part of my shape or my object is inside the bounding box, it's tapering only part of my cylinder. So I can fit to parent again, and it's creating this nice kind of taper. And so with that, that is pretty much our ray gun body. That's the sort of shape I was hoping for. And one other thing I would mention is sometimes it's good habit to get into renaming within the objects manager, because if you're in the middle of kind of a massive project and you've got hundreds of objects all kind of named cylinder, it isn't the best way to kind of keep track. And I'm not going to lie, I fall to this habit quite often. So ray gun, body, cylinder, just so I can keep track a bit easier.
Always good to work this way, especially if you're working in a team and you have to share your project, and so they're not phoning you up in the middle of the night going, which layer do it?
Is it cylinder 25?
Yes.
No, it's not. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah.
Sorry, I've had to deal with files like that. You've got cube, and cube, and someone says, "Can you delete the floor, please?" So,
it's normally the ones that I send to Matt.
Didn't want
take a
to
look
say
at my project. This is the habit I picked up purely for this webinar.
No, you've always had these good habits for many years.
Yes.
I've got a question coming in. Would you mind just undoing a few times and just doing that routine again? Because there's been a question from
Sure.
Vaishnavi.
I'll tell you what, I'll take
it
it completely out. Yeah. So this is my cylinder. So we click and hold, and we add our taper, and then I make it a child of my cylinder. And then my process is to then fit to parent, and then increase the strength, and that way we can see whether our position and rotation is right for our deformer. This one isn't. So with my taper selected and my rotation, I can click and hold my mouse, hold shift, so I can rotate it 90 degrees, and then I fit to parent again, and then increase or decrease the strength depending on whatever you need.
So it goes to answer that question that someone asked earlier, which is, how do you know the alignment? The truth is, we try it, we see if it works, and then if it doesn't work, we change it.
Yeah, that's often what happens, because but 9 times out of 10, it's normally in the wrong rotation or position.
And that's because of the orientation that you're viewing it at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got it. There's an interesting technique you just used there, Elly, that caught me out for a very long time, and that was rotating and then constraining the rotation to a certain number of degrees. And I know you held down the shift key, but there's a specific order to hold it down, isn't there?
There is, yes. So you have to click and hold on the mouse first on, let's say, this particular rotation. You then hit your shift key, and then you move your mouse with everything held down, and it does it in 5 degrees. Or
Fantastic.
You could go into the coordinates and change the rotation that way. Okay,
Lovely.
so
Thank you.
I guess the next thing to create would be the handle. And for that, I used a cube. That's what's nice about these kind of 3D objects. They're really simple to kind of manipulate and use, really. So let me match the project file again. So let me do that. So 53. There's nice round numbers as always that I'm using. So for this, we're actually going to use 2 deformers on the same object, which is absolutely fine to do.
The good thing about using deformers, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
The good thing about using deformers, it's what we call non-destructive modeling. So the deformers don't destroy the model underneath, which means that all we're doing is manipulating the deformers, and the cylinder can still be changed in either its length, its circumference, or anything like that at any particular point. And you can see we can maneuver anything that we want to without destroying anything underneath at this point. There may come a point where we will need to, but the deformers are really useful for getting things set up in a way that would have been really tricky or at least time consuming to have done before. Sorry, Elly, I'll hand back to you.
Oh no, feel free. Okay, so
there's a question that's coming from Michael about this actually. About the usual setup. I mean, you can probably see the question, but it's about the setup of the deformer often being the child. But what if it's the parent? Are there any tips about how to remember whether it's the parent or the child in the particular object that you're manipulating?
I guess it wouldn't deform, so that's probably like it wouldn't do it. So for example, if I made a cylinder a child of the taper and then change the strength of the taper, nothing would happen. So that might be the best way
to remember, I suppose, is the blues are deformers, and deformers go inside an object because you are telling it this is going to deform whatever it is a child of. The other ones, which are generators, so largely the green things, and they're all denoted by the green icons along the top, I try to think of as like an electricity generator. They require fuel to go inside the generator to generate electricity. In this instance, the generators are green things. They require something to go inside them to be a child to generate a shape out. So the blue ones go inside things, the green ones have things go inside them.
Aljosa has summed it up. Blue modifiers are children, greens are parents.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well done. There's another quick question about the rotation. Randy's asking, is there a trick to rotating around the point at which my mouse is located? I keep trying to rotate and the mouse rotates off screen, and my model rotates off screen. That could be an accurate question.
Is it rotating the object or rotating the camera around the object?
Oh, that's a good point, actually. If you wouldn't mind coming back and saying that, Andy. The object. Thank you.
So rotating the object, and it's rotating off screen.
Yeah.
I guess, Matt, would that relate to the axis of the object?
Quite possibly, but
if it's rotating
super basics, I don't know why it would be rotating off screen if we're rotating. I'd probably need to see what's going on for that one.
Yeah.
Would it make a difference if it wasn't at the center origin of the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So if I move that over here, so if I hit my rotation, it's rotating the center of this axis. So rotate around like that. Whereas if the axis was off here and I was rotating, it would be rotating all the way around.
Yeah.
Unless the axis has been moved.
Yeah, it shouldn't be for an editable, but I suppose if, for example, you moved your taper all the way to one side and then rotated the ray gun, if you rotated around the taper or around the ray gun, everything would go crazy. It wouldn't quite work because it's not where the two objects are. So Randy, you might just need to look and see if everything's in the right place.
Yeah, make sure your
temper is key and the model rotates away. You're moving the camera then. You're not moving you're moving the camera around things. So yeah, wherever you click and hold on with the mouse will be the point that the camera rotates around.
Yeah, so make sure you're kind of in the center of your object. But if you lose focus of your object, you can actually kind of hit the S key, is probably a nice little shortcut.
Yes.
So if I end up kind of like looking away and I got my cube selected and I want to focus on my cube, I can just kind of hit the S key and it will focus on that, which might be a nice little tip. Cool.
Apologies for responding to questions slowly. They come in and we have to scroll down and I can only see 3 at a time. So apologies, I'll do what I can. Sorry, Ellie, I'll let you carry on.
No, it's fine. No, any questions are absolutely fine. So I guess, yeah, so I'll show how you can add 2 deformers on the one object. So we've got our cube here. And what I want is I want to taper it and I want to bend it. So I'm going to do the taper first. So if I select my taper, make it a child of my cube, fits parent, and then lo and behold, the rotation is wrong. So I'm going to rotate 180. And then I'm also going to grab a bend, make that a child of my cube. And then as Matt said, we do need to increase the segments of my cube, because if I just do the bend now, I'll change the rotation first. So let me go on my coordinates and I know the rotation that I need for this. Go back on my strength. So because we've only got the one segment on our cube, the bend isn't doing what we want it to do. So if I increase my segments, we can see there that it's doing a nice bend. Okay, let me. There we go. And then we're also going to go back to my cube and hit fillet again. And then we're going to leave that as 3 and 3. It will create a nice little curved edge, which just looks a bit nicer in the render than kind of a straight 90-degree edge. So that's the start of our ray gun. Let me change that to ray gun handle. Oh, good, I'll spell in there.
Grip. That was the word we forgot. Grip.
Is this a grip or is this a handle? If anyone has a ray gun and can tell us, it would be great.
That's it. Yeah, anyone with a definitive guide to the parts of a ray gun.
Maybe Flash will know.
Yes, with the workshop manual.
Right, so the next bit I'll create is the trigger. And sometimes when you're doing a project, you might have kind of only about 10-15 minutes to do it. So modeling everything from scratch might not be kind of the most time effective way of doing things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to duplicate my handle. I'm going to flip it around and shrink it, and it's going to look like a trigger. And it's just, sometimes if you don't have to do everything from scratch, then you don't need to. So we can do a simple copy by hitting the command, clicking and dragging will duplicate. Also, I'm on a Mac, so Command C, Command V will also duplicate.
Control C, Control V for PC people.
So I've moved the second handle out. I'm going to rotate it 180, hit T, scale it right down. And I'm just going to kind of position it perhaps there. There we go. So that's a kind of, if you can get away with using things you've already created and just kind of changing them in a small way, then by all means, absolutely do that.
That's a nice little trick, time-saving trick, especially because it's copying those deformations as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let me go back to my week 1 project. So this next bit is our ray gun kind of emitter, I guess.
Emitter's a good word.
Emitter. As you can see, I put nose here with all my knowledge of ray guns. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it live.
Matt, what is the big projection disc that I have on the front of the Enterprise? I forgot the name
deflector
of it.
dish.
There you go. That's the deflector array for the ray gun.
Okay, that's what it can be called from now on.
Okay.
Not the nose as previously stated.
We do,
okay.
as Elly is saying, we need a ray gun specialist for the next one.
Yes, I feel like we should have had someone here who knows the ins and outs of ray guns. That would have been great. All right, so I'm going to call it an emitter mainly because I've already forgotten the word that you said. My emitter is made up of 6 different objects. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go through it on here. So I've Command C, Command V, and pasted it in. And this is made up of 1 cylinder. And what I've done on the caps, I've increased the radius to give it a kind of a total rounding here. So if I put that back down, you can see what that's done, and increase the segments to make it a lot smoother.
While you're doing that, Elly, we've had an interesting question from Richard. When you're building objects, is it better to create each part separately and then group them together? Or can you create the object from just one primitive and just extrude certain areas?
Yes, so that is a different type of modeling. So what we're doing here is we're deliberately using basic primitive objects which have set parameters to create our shape. But what you could do, like Matt, you might have to correct me, is it box modeling?
Yeah, box modeling, polygonal modeling, same name, different thing, different name, same thing, sorry. Yeah, it really does depend on what you're modeling for and your plan, really, as to whether or not you need to do everything out of one shape or not. Someone said earlier to me in the chat, and I responded with the same thing, I was told that it's best to try and make things out of one object when I was originally doing modeling years ago. It just doesn't seem to be the case now, and let's face it, things in real life are made up of separate objects. You know, real ray guns would be made up of separate bits that all screw together and link together and are welded or glued or plasticked. So why not model it that way? The truth is, it depends on what you're modeling for and what the outcome is. If it's going to just be an image and it works, it really doesn't matter whether it's modeled out of one thing or lots. It will only matter later on down the line if it then needs to animate or be deformed or textured in different ways.
So I hope that answers the question. Matt's our modeling expert.
I think it's a good point. It's whatever's fastest. Is the producer going to ask you whether you deformed one primitive? They're probably not. Probably going to ask you, where is it?
Yeah, I guess if it's like really a really advanced model that perhaps you can't use basic 3D objects for or deformers for, then perhaps that is a good way. But I guess this is like a good introduction into modeling, and then you can, in kind of like the next few weeks, we will look at different splines and generators, and then from there, when your objects are editable, you can do things like extruding certain parts of them to model in that way.
The reason they ask the amount of points when it comes to rendering the objects within a scene. Yes, but unless you're really getting into millions and millions of polygons and millions of points, it won't have that much of an impact, certainly not with the stuff that we're doing. And most of the things you say, unless you're going to start sculpting the Grand Canyon, the majority of stuff when it comes to polygons in Cinema 4D can handle up to at least 35 million on your normal machines, okay. So it wouldn't make that much of an impact if you were using separate objects or single objects. And to answer another question before I let Elly carry on and do what she needs to, can a model of primitives be animated? Yes, it can. Tune in to week 5 for that one.
Okay, cool. So to go through just this emitter, so it's made up from that first cylinder and then a second cylinder, which is far smaller, and a sphere on the end. And this was, as we've seen, simply just kind of creating objects in that way and shrinking them down, moving them into the right places. And then we've got 3 torus here. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete those. And I'm going to recreate them. So we've got to make sure, first of all, our orientation's right, then we can move them where they need to be. So I'm using the orange handles just to shrink these down. And you can do this by eye or specifically however you want them to be. And then I'm hitting Command on my keyboard, then clicking and dragging and letting go, and it will duplicate. And these can be lined up by eye, or you can come down here and see the position. So I'm going to round this to -365. And then my next one is I'm going to make it -400, so I know it's 35 centimeters difference. And then I'll do the same with that. So you now know that they have the same distance between each one, or you can do it by eye. It's personal preference again. And then what I've done, so similar to kind of in Photoshop, when you can group layers, you can also group objects in Cinema 4D using something called a null. So a null, I guess, has no, how would you say it, Matt? Has no parameters. It's just.
Yes, yeah, it has no attributes or parameters. It is literally null and void.
So it doesn't show up as anything, but it's a good way of kind of grouping objects together. And so what I'd done, I'd made my null, called it my ray gun emitter, I'd selected all my objects and I dropped them into the null. And so they're now kind of grouped together to save me having to think of random names for each ray gun emitter part, was the main reason. So
we got a quick question from.
Yeah.
Sorry, Elly. The quick question from Maria whilst you're on Torus is there a way to rotate the edges of the Torus?
I don't quite get what that means. Sorry.
Rotate the edges.
I think maybe it's about, perhaps you can give us some more information, Maria, but maybe it's about changing the diameter of that curve, or maybe changing the underlying geometry to adjust the curve or the bevel, if you like. And Maria's going to try and explain.
Sorry, Maria.
Rob's question, can you position objects relative to each other? Yes. So down the bottom where Elly was working with later, there's the there's the coordinates manager. So you can position things exactly in your sort of grid system. Basically, the world in Cinema 4D is made up a grid system of X, Y, and Z, and then minus X, Y, and Z. So you can use exact coordinates to align things and make sure things are 20 centimeters apart, 5 mil apart, or whatever, just by using the information in there. The other thing that's really useful is that those little boxes in Cinema 4D with the numbers in do maths for you. So if you're like me, you can't be bothered to work out 36.496 minus 1.784, you can actually just put minus 1.784 and it will do that for you. And then click enter and it will adjust that and then do what you need to do. So yeah, you've got full control over the positions, scales and rotations of things with all of the exact coordinates.
And you can actually match position as well, or anything. If I create a sphere and say I want it in the same kind of position as this current sphere, I can drop it and make it a child, and then I can zero out the position, and if I scale it down, you'll be able to see it's actually put it in the same position as this sphere. And then you can always take it out and it will remain in its position. Okay, I'm aware that we have 7 minutes left. So I guess the final part of our model is our fin. And what I've done with this is simply a cube with a taper, and it's been rotated. So if I just copy it, I'm cheating now. And then that is our basic ray gun model that we've used a few 3D shapes that are found within Cinema 4D and a couple of deformers. And one final little tip is if you find the bounding boxes to be quite confusing, you can actually hide them. So if we come over to, let's grab this taper, and you can see there are 2 grey dots. And if we make the top one red, it actually hides it from the viewport. And we can do the same for these. So if you've got loads of objects and loads of deformers and it's looking a little bit untidy, this is a nice little way of just making it look a bit neater. So that's the model, and I guess we've got a good 5 minutes for any other questions that anyone has.
There's a couple of ones that have come in. For one from Torrance, saying when they zoom in really close in the front view, sometimes this cursor is off screen when trying to make small adjustments. Is there a way of keeping the cursor on screen as you zoom in and out?
I'm trying to figure out what you mean by that as well.
So when we say zoom in and out, are we talking about dollying the camera in and out?
Yeah, in the orthographic views, top, front or side. I didn't know the cursor did disappear.
No.
If I scroll in and out using, I suppose with the orthographic views, I'm just using the scroll wheel, my cursor stays where it is and I zoom in wherever my cursor is. So I can see I have the little plus symbol that replaces the cursor, I guess. So it just turns into a plus to let me know that that's where it is. Very similar when you're using the rotate tools and stuff in Cinema normal view.
We are thinking collectively that it might be the access point he's talking about. It's not me, this is Maria and AJ and Logan who are pointing this out too. Torrance, have you got something specific to add in? Please let us know on that. One question from Francesca. How do you render in Cinema?
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of one of the later
topic, isn't it? Yes,
this is quite a big topic to cover in the next 4 minutes, but we are going to be going through kind of materials lighting and rendering later in this month. But I suppose if you just want to do a very quick simple render just to see how your model will look, and if you don't necessarily want to use this for anything or save it as like any kind of JPEG or format, this middle button here is you can render to picture viewer. So if we hit that render, you can see a really basic render of your model. But we'll be going a lot more kind of in-depth detail about rendering once we've got things like some textures and materials instead of just this grey looking model later on.
Lovely grey shading you've got on there.
We call it Cinema 4D grey. If it was a Dulux stain, it would be Cinema 4D.
Excellent. Great stuff. We do have a couple more questions in, but I wanted to point out some resources as well, just in the last couple of minutes. And one of those resources was the fact that if we've missed your question, please feel free to send us an email at training@maxon.net. Because we're doing these things every Monday during June, then we can answer your question 1 week late, or make sure that we include a concept like a couple of questions about the rendering aspect and so on. So please let us know that. I've added that link or the email address to the chat window, and that'll also be in the follow-up email. And can I take control of the screen, Ellie? Is that okay? Because I just want to show a couple of things.
By all means.
Okay, so if I make me the presenter, do I have to click next? Yes, I have to. Hidden behind
Olivier, yes, this is a beginner session. So all 5 of these this month are all sort of focused on people who have either never picked up Cinema 4D before or are completely new to 3D.
And that's a good point, because thank you for saying that, Matt. We've run a number of these sessions at multiple different levels, if you like. And so that's what we're really concentrating on, to fill in any gaps that you've got, or to give you a solid foundation as we're building up. And you'll notice that if you are new to cinema and you're a student, in the chat window, there's a link to student licenses. So that's worthwhile investigating too. And all that information will be in the email that follows up. But this is what I wanted to add in. This is just seeing behind the scenes now. This is the PowerPoint presentation I've just been hacking together. And although Elly and Matt have filled out most of this for me, I've just been adding some things as we're going along. We'll add this to the download list that you'll get in the email. But this is what we were talking about just at the beginning, is about some resources that could be quite useful as you're moving along. So these are some of the things that Elly and Matt were talking about earlier on, especially general tips for this week. Always save your project, as we were talking about.
Most important tip.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you guys were talking about before, it seems like a sensible thing to do, but it's easy to forget. In any case, we'll be adding more of these in here, and here's some of the shortcuts, including the Garoid, however we say that. In fact, even my PowerPoint doesn't know how to spell it. Grout, there we are.
Grout.
I thought I was having problems with Voronoi. Anyway, so this we'll add this to the link of stuff, and also just to help you remember where these things are. If you go to the Red Giant website, just under June, here it is, under the blog menu, just click on blog and you can see a list of these things. This is what we did this week. In fact, let's turn my webcam back on just so we can prove we're still here. But just on the, we haven't gone away. This, just in case you're interested, this is what we're covering next time. In fact, Elly and Matt, do you want to talk a little bit more about generators or the splines and more about deformers that we'll be covering on next week's session?
That's a bit. Am I to your left on the cam?
You are.
Over.
Yeah, I suppose so. Next week we're going to be looking at the generator splines. Obviously the deformers has been moved to this one. Generators and splines are a different way of modeling in Cinema 4D. It allows you to have a bit more control over certain shapes, but again, they're kind of restricted in what they do. You can always move forward with those and edit them and look at different polygons and things like that, which we will start to look at as well next week. So we're going to take the model that Elly has created today, and then we're going to add to it and build on it using some more different modeling things available in Cinema.
Fantastic, excellent. I think this has been quite useful because from the amount of questions that we've had about these specific things that catch people out, and also we had a nice question from Randy about material nodes and UVW and so on, and
yeah,
making sure we can get through those. Yes, that's a good point. So this is why we're running these.
I did just see a question about whether it can be done in light. So for people that haven't got the full version, and yes, everything that we've just done can be done in C4D light.
In fact, you remember when we said earlier on, let's ask you a question about can you do this in light? I was going to ask you, yeah, exactly. I've got my list of questions here that I completely
Our planned spontaneity.
Yeah, exactly that. It's just off the cuff, all this, isn't it? Obviously. I do have, on that theme, I do have a couple of other things that were going to be useful too, some useful links, because lots of these resources are available on Cineversity. So I've just added in a whole bunch of links onto the chat window where you can do similar things that we just talked about. But one of those, which is the light reference, talks about in depth the difference between Cinema 4D Lite and the full version. But you can, correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, but you can open up a light project inside the full version of Cinema 4D, and I believe the other way around as well, can't you?
As long as you haven't used tools that aren't included in light. So if you create a massive project and use things that aren't available in light and you open it in light, it will only show kind of part of your file. But the other way around would be, yeah, it would be fine.
So if you're in a situation where you had, say, a couple of, let's say you're in a team and a couple of people had the full version and you had light version, you can still interact and have workflows between you, because a lot of the things, in fact, as you were saying, Elly, all the things we did today, you can do in the light version.
Yeah.
And those deformers, are all the deformers in light all the same ones, or are there just as a reduced set of deformers?
I think it's everything.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I think it's things like MoGraph tools and stuff like that is limited, and the effectors are limited. Whereas I'm pretty sure we'll find out for next week.
We've got Kent that says not all of the deformers.
Oh, is there not?
And we've got Greg. Will Cinema 4D ever be available through subscription? Well, Greg, 4D is available through subscription. Currently, it's the only way. Well, you can buy perpetual if you want, but yeah, if you go to our main maxon.net site, you can have a look at our our buy page, and you'll be able to see the subscription options available to you. Don't forget, guys, if you are a student, you can apply for Cinema 4D for free for a 6 months license. So you guys,
and if you're a teacher,
and if you're a teacher, yes, of course.
If you're a teacher, yeah.
True. And the same goes for the Red Giant tools as well. We have the same deal. Now we're all one big family.
Indeed.
I'll wear my Red Giant t-shirt next week.
Yeah, we should do that. We should coordinate. In fact, let's coordinate live in front of everyone.
I'm just saying.
What? Okay, fine. Okay, we'll sort you out, Matt. Don't worry.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay, and so we've only overrun 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So thanks for bearing with us. And thanks for the nice comments at the end. And one last thing we want to leave. Matt, would you please just scroll up and show the rest of your wall?
No.
Amazing. Love that. So he's proper destructive, isn't he? Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. This is destructive modeling.
Yes, exactly. Cool. Well, thank you for attending, everyone. And don't forget, we'll be back here this time next week to do the next session. And let us know if you've got any questions in the meantime. But thanks again. And thanks again, Elly. Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thanks for listening.
Right. See you on the next one. All right.
Bye.
Cheers then. Bye.